Hi, you're watching Just Picture It, and I'm Mei Lin Fung. This show is about time. John Furey is the founder of the MindTime project, which began in 1997. MindTime is a social sciences research initiative devoted to understanding human thinking and its impact on our world. John has done extensive work internationally and has enjoyed years of fruitful collaboration with teams at the Nature Conservancy, the Royal Bank of Canada, Merrill Lynch, and Hewlett-Packard, and has been on National Public Radio here in the US. He's been a featured speaker in events and workshops in many countries around the world. And traveling around the world, he became curious about how different people in different countries think about time. And he's developed a wonderful visual picture for our patterns of thinking. Welcome, John. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, Mei Lin. Yeah.
So today, we're going to explore these questions. Who are we, and what is our relation to other people?
Good questions. Good questions. They're very big questions. I think one of the things that I've realized over the years of looking at people around the world is everybody in the world has a relationship with time in one way or another. I mean, for everybody, there is a tomorrow, and hopefully, and there's a yesterday, and we have memories. Yes. And it seems that it's one of the things that binds us together as human beings. And in fact, the more we have actually looked at our relationship with time, the more we realize that actually everything that we do begins with our thinking, and our thinking happens within this world of time.
So how does it work with us in our relationship to the environment that we're in?
Well, it's interesting. If you think about it, a country like Switzerland has a very sort of staid and straightforward and planned order to things, where you come to America and certainly Silicon Valley, and we're all over the map. We're all about the future and visions and things. So we create our cultures, we create our environments, which are a product of our thoughts. And in fact, if you look around you, there really is nothing in the man-made world that has not actually started its life as a thought. So because thoughts are framed or created within this temporality, comes from the Latin word tempus, which means time, because our thoughts come from time, we could basically say that human thinking in time has created the world around us.
Wow.
Yes.
So if human thinking has created the world around us, has human thinking created time? What is the connection between our minds and time?
Oh, I wish I could answer that. It's almost as though that's one step beyond what we can really get to. What we do know is it's the human mind that created the past and the future. Time is just time. It's one of the essential dimensions of our universe. Arguably, it exists outside of us. However, our particular perceptions of it, the way we actually use it to create a world, the way we use it to form our thoughts, and how it actually drives our personality and our interactions with other people, that's very uniquely human, I think.
So there's a picture that you've created about our different patterns of thinking. So let's take a look at that picture.
Well, yes. In fact, this is, if you will, a map of the world of thinking. So if human thinking is bound by time, which is the sort of basic theory that we've been operating on for about 20 years now in our research work, then it stands to reason if there's a future, a present, and a past, we can actually create a map, a triangle, and those three become the APCs on that triangle. And what's interesting, as you can see in the picture, is that all of the sort of human concepts, the things that we really feel describe humans, like hope and truth and harmony, can all, if you will, be said to arrive or arise out of that actual world of thinking, which is mapped in this particular very simple triangle.
So, but inside that triangle, there's different colors and there's different kind of patterns. What's going on there?
That's the operative word, patterns. So our thought patterns, quite literally, are different. So we understand people have differences, different personalities, different temperaments, different characters. One of the most fundamental differences we have is that we think blending future, past, and present, or possibility, certainty, and probability in different ways. And those are thought patterns at work which express themselves in the world itself.
So let's take a look at one of those corners of the triangle.
Okay.
Certainty.
Right. Okay, so certainty, the patterns of thought of certainty are, I know you're here, you see. And so I can know a lot about you. So the pattern of certainty is one which accumulates information, brings in knowledge. It really tries to understand, and it really, in many ways, fashions the meaning to things that we actually have as human beings. So scientists and architects and engineers and academics who need to really understand, who need to get to the depth and to the bottom of things, they think in these long, slow, deep patterns of thought. And what it does is it creates truth, it creates reality, it creates solidity. It's the sort of, it's the foundation of our, if you will, our way of thinking about things. It's what I can actually know about you.
So I can get that science is a way that we've actually tried to understand certainty. If I do this, then this will happen.
Right.
But what about technology? People feel today technology is very uncertain, and there's, well, not uncertain, but it could go in many directions. What's the difference between science and technology?
I'm not sure there really is a difference from the point of view of thinking, at least. The certainty in the technology is that if you put a certain chip on a computer board, that it will do a certain thing. We can produce millions of copies of a computer, and we know with certainty that as long as we produce the same circuit board, we actually will have the same result at the end of the day. And it's that kind of pragmatic certainty. It's that kind of like, yes, if we do the same thing over and over again, we don't need science to tell us that it gives us certainty. We actually have it in our own experience of life.
So we can feel it. It's part of us.
Yes, I mean, you have a certainty about it. If I pull the handle of my door, the door will open. You don't have to question it every time you arrive at your door. Or, you know, if I pick the phone up, we hope there will be a signal. We don't have to question it every single time. So these are certainties that we can have in our world.
Okay, so you're talking about opening a door. Now we're going from certainty to perhaps probability.
Maybe it doesn't open.
It doesn't, yeah, maybe it doesn't open. So you've got something else here talking about probability.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll open, maybe it won't open.
Well, and let's switch from the door because we hope the door will always open. But actually, what if the door was locked? So if you know you're going to go to a locked door, you're going to have a plan. And you're going to have a plan to have gotten the key before you get to the door. So probability is really that part of our thinking. It's the patterns of thought which don't deal with certainty, but they deal with what can I be relatively assured of. If I have a key to this door and it's the right key, I can be relatively assured that the key will actually open the door. If I organize with my friends to meet at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I can be relatively assured that we will all get together at the same time and we understand what 3 o'clock means. In other words, we can plan our way there. And it's this idea that we can plan for our goals in the relatively near term, that these particular patterns of thought really are about. It's that frame of time, or that time frame that is bound by, I know that if I do this and this and this, I will get to there. Processes, plans, structure, organization itself is all about these sort of patterns of thought that bring a sense of harmony and stability to our world. They're what make it livable, manageable. They, if you will, take out the chaos, and they give us a sense of continuity in life.
Okay, so now I understand that within the triangle, we've got another angle, which is our last angle.
That's
and
right.
so now we've talked about certainty, we've talked about probability, and what's next?
Possibility. So we've dealt with certainty being the past and probability being the present, and not the present as in the moment of now, but the present as in our thought patterns about the upcoming present. And then future, possibility. It's wide open. So this is about the big picture. It is about speculation. It's not to do with facts and it's not to do with processes. It's to do with what if. What if we went and did this, or what if we did this? What if we tried this for a change? What would happen? It's that part of us that wants to explore, and not to inquire about a fact, but to inquire about literally the things that we don't know, the things that are out there somewhere. The visionaries of this world are always dealing in that world of, well, what if we did this? Or what if I took that and put it together? What would I get? So it's that sense of curiosity, but it's even bigger than curiosity. It really is a sense of vision, of possibility and ideas.
So the possibility of ideas, it's almost like a very optimistic, you're thinking that you can affect the future. Can you contrast a little bit with the people who are worried about the future?
Yeah, that's great. So we're all moving into the future. So all of these three patterns of thought are dealing with the future in their own way, of course, because that's really all there is, as far as we understand it, as perceived as human beings. Past thinking, or certainty thinking, is more saying, I'm not going to do that until I have enough information. So I'm not going to sign up for that until I actually know for certain that it's what I want. Future thinking or possibility thinking is, well, I'll just sign up, and if it doesn't work out, I'll go figure out something else. So there's this contrast of one, the possibility thinking jumps in to find out, and certainty thinking hesitates before going in, and it needs that certainty.
Okay, so let's take a look at the whole picture. I think we've got this whole way of being here in Silicon Valley, which is the possibility thinking, right? I mean, this is the heart of the world's aspirational thinking. This is where people are always living in the future, and they're thinking, I want to just do it. I want to take my idea and I want to make it happen. So it seems like there's a really natural way around this triangle.
There is. I'm going to hop over here and play the weatherman so I can show you. It's a bit easier to see on the map. So this map of ours of the world of thinking has all kinds of information contained in it. So you can imagine people coming up with ideas and really wanting to get their ideas out to the marketplace as soon as they possibly can and execute on them. And only when they really go wrong do they tend to come over here to the certainty thinking and say, what happened? Give us some information, give us some analysis. You can imagine a computer like the BlackBerry, where the idea was rushed to the marketplace, and then they really didn't do their long-term thinking. They really didn't do their research. They just went straight to execution. And so now the world's sitting there wondering, well, what went wrong? What can we actually understand? How can we reinvent this thing? And they're going to reinvent it, come back right here, and they're going to go around this another time. And this is anti-clockwise, if you think about it. It's not really using the wisdom of time as we know it. And that really means that this map is giving us a new and different way of thinking about how we organize our thinking.
These words, anti-clockwise, it's also anti-wise. It reminds me of a conversation that we were in the other day where a Silicon Valley entrepreneur came up to John and said, I have these great ideas, but as soon as I talk to the VCs, they pour cold water over them. So what's all that about? What pattern of thinking are the VCs showing? What pattern of thinking is the entrepreneur showing?
Well, that's a really, really great question. In fact, the reason that we have created this map and our technology is we can actually map people into this map. So over here, in this area of future thinking or possibility thinking, is where the entrepreneurs, the idea generators, the creatives come up with their stuff. But now the VCs, unlike angel investors, the VCs, they're sitting right over here somewhere, which really is that area of the map to do with how do we plan it, how do we make it real, how do we bring it down to earth and create concrete results, and what do we know about it? That's all the way down here from the certainty thinking. So if you can imagine these poor chaps down here coming with their ideas, they're all excited, and then these folks, well, they're not actually into ideas. They're into ideas that can be made into processes and that there's information about that can be collected. So the conflict really is one of these two different ways of thinking, these different patterns of thought actually colliding in a way, because these want to keep their options open and these want to bring it down to earth and make it real and create a process that is repeatable, because that's what business is about.
So that reminds me of the big conundrum. So many places around the world are trying to be centers of innovation like Silicon Valley. And they're saying, come on, everyone, let's have ideas. But in a way, they don't have. Silicon Valley is the heart of venture capital in the world. And so there's lots of VCs here for those ideas to be filtered through and tested before they go out. But other countries, other cities have a problem with this because they don't have the VCs to do that testing. So they might start a lot of ideas that end up not going anywhere.
Well, yes, and I think this is one of the sort of the eternal problems. We look at businesses, we say, well, how come businesses so often fail? And in part, if you think about it, if you just take an idea and you rush the marketplace and you ignore these folks who've got all of this information for you that can contribute and perhaps avoid making the mistake, then what you really are doing is you're going anti-clockwise instead of going clockwise and going like, well, I have an idea. Would you actually test it for me before we try to actually make it? In other words, would you tell me what it is about this idea that is going to work, that isn't going to work, whether it's a good idea? So really what we're suggesting here is you can make a much more efficient, if you will, operation if you stop running to the market too quickly and just slow it down and say, okay, how can we discover, how can we learn something about this before we actually spend an awful lot of time and money and energy executing it, which is what all present thinking or this probability thinking is all about.
But these possibility people, they want to just do it. There's a resistance, a kind of inertia, not wanting to go to these people who will pour cold water. In my work, I actually run workshops for people who are trying to generate innovation within their groups. And they have a big problem. First of all, nobody wants to come up with ideas that might be just kind of thumbs down, don't like. So they're really struggling to get innovation going when people are worried that others will say thumbs down. So to me, there's a real gap between the possibility, entrepreneurial, innovating people who want to see the future and the kind of, the skeptical, perhaps pessimistic, show me the evidence people. I mean, how do they communicate with these different ways of thinking? It's a struggle. It's a struggle out there.
It is, and in fact, I mean, how do they communicate? The answer is usually not very well. And I think the reason is and you can sort of see it on our map here. Over here in Future, we have this very kind of frenetic kind of thinking. So the waves of thinking are very quick, whilst the certainty thinkers are much longer, slower. And if you can imagine this choppiness crashing into this long, slow, deep thinking, where you've got a collision. They're not actually seeing eye to eye. They're not even on the same wavelength, literally. So we actually have to figure out how do the future possibility thinkers stop being insulted and taken aback by people who really actually want to help at the end of the day, because everyone has value to bring in this. So when they consider that their ideas are not sacrosanct, but they're just ideas, and they may or may not prove to be right, the value of these past certainty thinkers is to actually figure out which ideas are the right ones. And so the collaboration that needs to occur across this bridge, if you will, between the two, is a bridge between two very, very different kinds of thinking, one highly conceptual and abstract, and one highly factual abstract. The conceptual being, I've got a new idea, the fact being, well, let's examine exactly how good this is. Now, you mentioned the resistance, and yes, the idea people really don't want anyone ripping their idea to pieces because they would just love to run up here as fast as they can and execute it. Why? Because we love to have people love our ideas. But if we actually allow these people to contribute into it and to actually examine that idea and pull it to pieces and tell us what is going to work and what is not going to work, what we can do is actually get more good ideas into the hands of the probability people who are going to plan how to take it to marketplace.
So I'm reminded of that Benjamin Franklin saying, a stitch in time saves 9, which is that really you have these great ideas, but do the stitching, do the checking, have the discipline to check it out first before you take it to production. And that also reminds me of my work back at Intel. We used to always have to kind of really check how well that idea would work. And just before we kind of go back into this, I want to describe, so Intel was one of those semiconductor companies that really worked out how to make big margins, make a lot of money out of semiconductor production, where a lot of their competitors really had a lot of trouble. And Bridge is really telling me, how did Intel do it? They applied the rigor. They did the stitch in time to save the 9. Before they went to execution, they did a lot of testing.
Yes, and I think we'll see, or you'll find that wherever the stakes are really high, sending a rocket to the moon or building a space lab or building a drilling rig and putting it somewhere, wherever that happens, we as humans, we've learned, we actually have to go check the science out. We've got to do the engineering properly. We can't have airplanes falling out of the sky or oil rigs exploding. And it happens every now and again. There are terrible accidents, but we really avoid most of them. I mean, if you think about how many machines we build as humans, what we do with them, we do avoid most of them because of this certainty thinking and using it before we actually implement. It's in our day-to-day lives. You go home. You are a future thinker. Your spouse is a past thinker. That's where the conflicts seem to affect us on a personal basis. And I think that's where the bridge can be most crossed most successfully, by simply understanding that we all are bringing value to the same thing, human thinking. And all three of these fundamental thought patterns actually contribute. None of us has all of the answers, and all of us actually are participating or can participate collaboratively. So can you imagine actually welcoming the difference that someone brings into your life in their thinking as opposed to rejecting it? And can you imagine also celebrating it in such a way that, no, the certainty thinkers are not stick in the muds any more than the future thinkers are flakes. It's just the nature of the thought patterns, and all of them together create our whole thinking. And that's really what we need to start paying attention to.
So I think we also want to think about what's the effect on the probability people, the ones at the top of the triangle, because the probability people are seduced by the charisma of the possibility people. They say, oh, I love that future. I'm just going to go and do it. And so they almost need to say, I love that picture, but I don't want to try 10 things that don't work. Give me just 5 things that don't work.
Well, yes, and I think we all want a better future. And you know, it's no different. The probability thinkers, they want to make it work. They're running the air traffic control systems and designing in our cities. Everybody wants to create a better world. The question is, do we take, as you said, the stitch in time and actually have information that is real coming from certainty thinkers and handing it up into the plan? Or is there really no consequence whatsoever, in which case we can iterate, we can put lots and lots of ideas and test them very, very, very quickly indeed, and then measure them. And it's just 2 different ways of thinking about it depending on what's at stake. The key is to always remember that all 3 of these have value to bring. And if we have high stakes, and even moderately high stakes, it really helps us to be clockwise, to really use time in a way that is going to save us a lot of pain at the end of the day and a lot of time and energy.
So recap for us, getting wise. Let's get wise about time. So if you had to kind of help us, what have we covered? And I think you've done a fabulous job introducing us to all these new patterns of thinking. What's our takeaway? How do we be wise about time and patterns of thinking?
I think the most important thing to remember, and it's sort of at the risk of repeating myself a little bit, because it's such an important thing, all human beings think, all human beings have value to bring. If we understand people's thinking patterns, their preference towards future, present, or past thinking, what we do is we begin to recognize their real value, and we can change our expectations. I may walk into a room and have a certain expectation, but is that realistic given that I'm speaking with a probability thinker that doesn't want to hear my latest idea on a Monday morning? On Friday, they thought they had a plan for next week. It's not fair to come in and change it. So what this allows us to do is to recognize our expectations and to own them as our expectations, and to become far more realistic about how people interact, what they bring of value, and how to use them successfully in the right roles and right positions, including in a simple meeting. So if I were going to have a meeting, I wouldn't start a meeting without actually saying, let me draw a little map and let's actually see who is where in this map so we can understand what value will they bring. And even more to the case, are we missing an entire set of patterns? Do we have no certainty thinking, in which case we may come out of that meeting thinking we've got the best idea since sliced bread, and actually it's the worst idea we'd ever could have come up with, but we just had nobody asking the question, is that real?
So practically, are we thinking that each team should have members with different patterns of thinking? Would those be stronger teams?
Rule of thumb, yes. However, given a certain situation, there is certainly people from these 3 different patterns who will be able to deal with that. If you're sending a rocket to the moon, you need a lot of engineers.
Yes.
You don't want a lot of people speculating with ideas the whole time. However, if you're trying to invent a new product and brainstorming, you probably want more future thinkers in the room and probably not as many certainty and probability. But at the end of the day, I think the caution is we need to have all 3 working together collaboratively, using their strengths and coming together by understanding and having the right expectations and the right language to actually start communicating more effectively.
So let me give you 2 situations. One situation is I understand patterns of time thinking, and I go in with my team, and my team doesn't understand that. So I can take into account the ways people are thinking, so that I can facilitate us moving around in a clockwise manner. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is for every member of the team knows this. How would that work?
Well, I personally think that this is an awareness that all human beings should have. We become aware of ourselves as children. We become aware of our habits and our manners. I think this is just another piece of information. And frankly, I've worked with 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds, and they seem to get this much more quickly than the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds. And I think it's because it's very useful. It actually allows young people to understand the roles that they play and why they see the world the way they do, why they enjoy the things they like and why they perhaps don't enjoy some things and why they might resist them. I think at the end of the day, the really important thing is the awareness of this changes the nature of outcomes. The more people in an organization who actually understand that thinking, we're not all the same, and we're not talking about personality here, we are talking about thought patterns, and that the differences in our thinking actually come together to create whole thinking. And the more awareness we have, the more we start designing our meetings, our processes, our organizations, the roles that we occupy in those organizations, based on something really real, which is thinking and the thought patterns that we have.
So I think what you're saying is that there are many dimensions of thinking. There's the personality part, but there's also this time way of thinking. So you could be an introvert and have any of these patterns. You could be an extrovert and have any of these patterns.
There tend to be relationships between them. The certainty thinker's more introverted, the possibility more extroverted. But at the end of the day, yes. Thinking.
Well, this has been fabulous. You've opened our minds to a whole new way of thinking. I love this way of thinking about time, and it's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. And this is it for Just Picture It today, and thank you for joining us.